Okay, well, let's hop right back into it. Thank you for coming out. Thank you for being here. I'm glad to have you back and kicking off the second half of our semester. To jump back to where we were before, our good friend and fellow student here, Fred Richard, was our guest, February 23rd, talking a little bit about risk management, opportunity identification, branding, and the like, especially about branding, if we're being honest. Pivot a little bit today to go back to our core constructs of the entrepreneurial mindset with an alum who is not that far removed. He was just here in your seat doing exactly as you are today, what, 7 years ago, 8 years ago now? It's been a heck of a journey since then, and him and his alumni co-founder have raised quite a company, evolved it, sold it off, and of course, like all good entrepreneurs, he's now on to his next thing. So, I want to play you a little clip of his visit last time.
The entrepreneurial journey is as much like a mental journey and understanding yourself as it is like creating a startup. And I found that like, it's a journey that vacillates so much from like, I would say like unrelenting exuberance and overconfidence to the feeling like I know nothing.
Please help me welcome Alex Lieberman. Well, it's been a minute since we connected at Ehour here. Good to have you back.
Thanks, man. It's one of the more uncomfortable things to watch a video of yourself. So thank you for doing that.
Of course, absolutely. It's not as uncomfortable as seeing yourself with hair and then not having hair, I assure you. There's that. Okay, so we got to take this all the way back to when you are sitting in their seats as a student, 2014, 15-ish. Talk to us about what the start of this company was and how this all, what the genesis was.
Yeah, totally. And just to break it down for 1 second, because by the way, we're going to be trying something in here that I've never tried before. So this could go horribly wrong, but we're going to all go through this together.
Absolutely.
Basically, we're going to talk through the journey of the brew, but at the same time, the goal for both of us is that everyone leaves today with a business idea, a problem, a solution, a customer, a business model, something that they can actually test this coming weekend. And you'll actually have homework at the end where you reach out to me if you actually push forward the business. And we're going to use parts of the journey at Morning Brew as the starting point for working through this. And so just to talk about, the origin of the brew,
Alex, real quick. Show of hands, how many people have not heard of Morning Brew before? Okay, so let's give just a quick 10-second concept.
So very simply, Morning Brew is making business news suck less. We have newsletters, we have podcasts, we have video shows, we do social content. The original product when we started the business at Michigan when I was a senior, my co-founder was a sophomore, was just a daily newsletter. And now we've expanded to a team of 230 people. We have dozens of products. Our audience is 10 million plus people. And you can think of us as basically the Wall Street Journal meets CNBC for our generation.
Our generation being millennials and Gen Z?
Yeah. Someone said the phrase zillennial the other day, which it was the first time I've ever heard that.
How do you define it as zillennial?
It's both generations, millennials and Gen Z.
Okay. All right, good to know. Okay. All right, so now we can go back to the origin story.
Cool.
So before any of this happens, you're a student, you're hanging out, you're saying, hey, I've got to find a job.
Yeah, so, just to kind of set the table, my dream growing up was not to be an entrepreneur. I actually really didn't know what the word meant. I didn't grow up in an entrepreneurial family. My entire family worked in finance. So my dad was a trader at Citigroup. My mom worked at a Japanese bank. My grandpa worked at Prudential. So like my whole dream, I literally had it written on a whiteboard as a kid, be the best trader in the world. And I had no idea what that meant, but it was just like I wanted to be like my parents. So I went to Michigan, was in the business school, going through like the classic finance internship thing each year of being in Ross. And I get into my senior year at Michigan, and I had my job in hand. So the way it typically works is like you have a junior year internship, hopefully you get an offer for after you graduate. I had my offer at Morgan Stanley, had accepted my offer. I only had to take 3 classes my entire senior year, and so I had this abundance of time. And so basically I was like a month into senior year, I was playing a shit ton of FIFA and NHL, And I was like, I need to do something better with my time, or at least with some of my time. And so I started helping students prepare for job interviews. I would always ask students, how do you keep up with the business world? Every student had the same exact answer. It felt like everyone orchestrated it before. It was like, I read the Wall Street Journal, and I read it because that's what my parents told me to do. And then I'd be like, do you enjoy it? And they would be like, no, it's dense, it's dry, I can't even finish the whole thing.
What do you think had you in a position to help other students prepare for interviews?
No idea.
But just took the opportunity.
I think it was just because I had the job lined up, and I knew I had friends both in my fraternity as well as in the business school that I knew were re-recruiting. And so sometimes they just wanted to do mock interviews, and I think it started by them being like, hey, can you help? Can you mock interview me? So I think it was the combination of that. And then the first problem I saw was like students were about to spend their entire careers in business. Like that was their aspiration, yet they didn't have content that they actually enjoyed about the business world, which kind of didn't make sense to me. At the same time, I also was like, is there a way I can stay up to date with business so that when I go to Morgan Stanley after college, I actually I'm on top of my game and I know what's going on, and I didn't have this like year-long hiatus of not following the business world. And so that led to creating, the OG Brew.
Okay, so at this point in time, you've got your job locked up, you're helping some others by way of the fact that you've already secured something, so there's some credibility that you know how to pass through an interview successfully and kind of get the opportunity there. But this isn't all you're doing while you're at Michigan. There's other activities you're involved in. There's other things you're doing. Kind of give us a glimpse into what those were and whether they played into your ability to help others.
So this may not be like the most popular thing to say while sitting in a room at the University of Michigan, but I would say like the things that gave me the best tools to ultimately build Morning Brew were not the things that happened in the classroom. It was all of my extracurriculars. And I would say the one that actually gave me the most foundation for building a media business was I ended up becoming the executive director of this publication on campus that I think is still here today, Consider Magazine. I had literally no content experience. I was a shitty writer. I had no design experience, no media experience. But originally I joined Consider because it was going to be like a resume patter to look better for applying to finance jobs. But I actually loved it. And it was my first experience like editing writers, building out a publication, thinking about distribution strategy on campus. It was like the most real world applicable thing related to building a business that I had ever done. And so I would say that was the number one thing that actually inadvertently was kind of like the best launch pad for building a media company.
Right, at that point in time, you're not even thinking about it as like business skills or the like, you're just essentially scratching the surface and curiosity.
Right, and we'll get to this in a minute, but like when I first started Morning Brew, we didn't think about it as a business at all. It was like this hobby, it was this passion project, which I don't think there's one right way to start a business. Like I think you can start a business by identifying a problem and thinking about it as a business from day one. That's probably the better way to build a business. But it was the most organic thing that like I just started doing this hobby. This hobby started to pick up steam. And then at some point this hobby turned into a business. And the reason I love that was the way things started is because it was like the most authentic version of entrepreneurship. We didn't start it because we wanted to make money. We didn't start it because entrepreneurship was like this sexier, cool thing. It was literally just because
you run into a problem.
Yeah, we're doing it for fun.
Yeah, you're doing it for fun. You're recognizing why you're doing it, that there's some organic hurdles and problems that just shouldn't be there. And why isn't somebody doing something about this?
Exactly.
Let's use that as the segue, students. Pull out that piece of paper that you got coming in the door.
Okay, so
exercise is listed above if needed.
Perfect. So something that entrepreneurs always say to me is like, I generally view there's like two buckets of founders of companies, and they're pretty well documented. One is called a visionary, and one's called an integrator. Visionary is someone who has like 100 ideas a day. Their brain goes everywhere. Generally more creative. Generally more extroverted, and an integrator is someone who's like more analytical, linear thinking, generally more introverted in nature. And obviously it's a spectrum, but those are kind of the two buckets of founders. I always find that people say they can't think of a business idea, and I actually think it's completely off. I think everyone in this room could think of 10 plus business ideas a day if they think about things the right way. So we're gonna do an exercise that I call problem hoarding. The other way I think about it, or the analogy I use is calling it the squeaky brain. Basically, the reason people don't think of business ideas is because they put their brain on autopilot in life and they aren't actively looking for things that could be better or less frictionful or less annoying. And so what I want everyone to do is basically problem hoard for the next 3 minutes. So I want you to basically play out everything, like your life over the last day or week, and start trying to think about things that either felt annoying to you, ask the question of like, why couldn't this have been better? Something that was like confusing. And so I'll just give you an example. Since 8:30 this morning, I've been playing this game of problem hoarding or squeaky braining, and there were like 9 business ideas that I thought of. So I'm gonna share a few just to get the ball rolling, and then we're gonna give everyone a chance to think about what are problems or kind of squeaky things that they've experienced in their lives. So here, let me share a few. Okay, here's my squeaky list since 8:30 a.m. Number 1, bathing my dog sucks. What if there was a dry bar for dog? I would pay $150 a month to bring Rambo, who's my mini Bernedoodle, in for bi-weekly baths and blowouts. Number 2, while I was putting my pants on this morning, why do jeans need belts? It means they don't fit perfectly. What if there's a way to create custom jeans affordably at scale so you don't need a belt? Number 3, while trimming my beard this morning, trimming my beard creates a huge mess in the bathroom. What if there was a beard trimming catcher that just worked? I'll read 2 more. 1, AirPod mics absolutely suck. People can't hear me when I talk on the phone. Someone should build Bluetooth headphones optimized for digital workers. And my last one, my personal favorite, urinal splashage is a real age-old issue. Someone needs to solve it, and there's a huge benefit to businesses if someone does. So problems and like squeaky things are everywhere. You just have to learn to take your brain off autopilot. And to me, it's, you know, people talk in life about the difference between hearing versus listening. Hearing is a passive activity, listening is an active activity. To me, the squeaky brain is literally just the active version of observation in your life. So
okay, I'm going to cut short what he said for 3 minutes, though, minute and a half.
Okay.
Minute and a half, let's do that.
So just start listing squeaky things in your life or problems you've identified over the last week, and then we're going to get a few people to share.
Come back in a minute and a half. Okay, so hopping back to student Alex, you identify this problem of business news sucks, it's not digestible, no one reads Wall Street Journal every day except for me, and I don't even know why I do it. There's got to be something better.
Yep.
Take us then to what's the next step. What'd you develop? What was otherwise the initial product build?
Yeah, so we're going to go through this exercise in a minute to take one of the problems that you've written down. But basically, you know, everyone talks about building an MVP. The way I
minimum viable product.
Yeah, and the way I think about it is kind of what is cheap enough and good enough, because you can't just build something that's really cheap at first if the product sucks and it's not going to tell you what you want it to tell you, like if people would actually buy it or pay for it, et cetera. So to me, cheap enough, good enough means what is the thing that you can build as cheaply as possible to test whether you can solve this problem in a way that people would pay you. So for Morning Brew, for context, the original product that we built was called Market Corner, and it was as MVP as MVP gets. It was a Microsoft Word template. There's a single template in like the Microsoft Word template builder for newsletters. Open that up, spend 5 hours reading the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, Financial Times, The Economist. Basically synthesized what I thought were the most important business news stories for college students, wrote it in 50 to 150 word blurbs. And my whole thing was write it like I speak, because my whole thesis about content at the time is it read like a robot was spewing words at you versus an actual conversation that 2 people were having. Filled out this template, did the top 5 business stories, and then I did like business adjacent stuff, trivia question of the day, interview question of the day, this day in history and business, et cetera. Exported the doc as a PDF. I created a listserv of emails on, I think it was the M Community website. So at the time, the listserv was marketcorner@umich.edu. There was no website. If you wanted to sign up for my newsletter, you had to have heard about it from someone. You had to reach out to me and say, hey, Alex, I heard about your newsletter. Can you add me to your listserv? And we got the first 400 readers of our publication from a website-less, shitty newsletter that was impossible to sign up for. But that's exactly why I knew there was some demand for it.
And there's an overlooked element in there that you couldn't have done if you weren't a student at the time, which was to get that email listserv run through the university and probably other resources granted to you from the university that weren't otherwise available if you were not here.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I mean, to me, I always say that the best time to start a business is while you're in college, because like your cost of failure is so low. And also when I think about how we built Morning Brew, we raised a small round of funding. We raised $750K from 28 investors. Most of those investors were either literally Michigan, like Zell Lurie was one of our biggest checks, but also like alumni of Michigan. But then also like we got money through the grant program. Like Michigan was completely the springboard. And again, as students, if you fail with your business, and the odds are that you will fail with your first startup, like almost every successful entrepreneur I know took 3 or 4 swings at bat before they actually succeeded with the business. That doesn't mean you should try to fail, but it means the odds are that you're gonna have to play this game many times, which means you actually have to have a love for building things, and you shouldn't just build a business because that's like the hot thing to do right now. But yeah, I would say building a business in college is like, that would be my advice to everyone, is trying to build something while you're in school is the lowest risk way to get involved in entrepreneurship. Because, even today, as I think about starting businesses today, my opportunity cost and my obligations to other things beyond myself, whether it's my wife, my family, my dog, like the cost of living, it's all gone up, which means the risk of building a business is way higher today than when we were starting the brew when I was 21 years old.
Absolutely. And yeah, to your point, the risk is low. Do it now. Do it while there's resources abundant to help you that you don't have to go scrape up on your own in the outside world. You have access to things that you'll never have access to otherwise. Hopping back to your comment about how you built this, the notion of just creating a PDF that you're sending out to people and you're putting out and putting together, and people have to email you to then be added to it. That's not scalable. And we're going to get to that in a second. But you want to run them through an exercise to take their problem.
So here's what we're going to do now. You're going to pick one of the problems. Hopefully you have a problem or like a squeaky thing that you wrote down on your list. Pick one of them, the one that's most interesting to you, the one that either feels like the most acute pain to you, or
the one you'd want to obsess about.
Yeah, the one that is just most interesting to you. And what I want you to now write out is what would be kind of like your cheap enough, good enough solution to the problem. So if you wanted to actually go sell a customer on your solution, on your product tomorrow, what do you think is the cheapest way you could do it, but it is good enough to solve the problem? So to just give you an example, the dry bar for dogs, what I would likely do is I would go to people in my apartment building in Hoboken that I know have dogs, and I basically say to them, hey, I'm opening a dry bar for dogs, and it's in the basement of our building. Pay me $30, and I'll give you unlimited baths and blowouts for your dog for the next 3 weeks. And I would try to sell it to them and see if they'd be open to it. And I'd try to provide them a great experience. So take a minute and a half?
Yeah, but to clarify, in addition to the product that he's building out, the minimum viable product, he's also telling you who his customer segment would be, which is part of the exercise.
So as you write down what the offering is, the solution is, also write down exactly who your customer is as specifically as humanly possible. So when I wrote the first Morning Brew and I sent it to students, I was so acutely aware that my first customer is going to be the upwardly mobile college business student who is looking to have a career in finance, consulting, or some area of business after school.
Okay, minute and a half.
And then we're going to get a few people to share.
So now taking this back to the Morning Brew story, we've got a sense of where it started. We've got a sense of the initial product. We've got a sense of kind of how that worked and who you were offering to, the customer segment. But that doesn't make it a business. That doesn't monetize it. That doesn't get money in the door and create revenue and allow you to scale and hire. Walk us through how that happened.
Yeah. So a newsletter and a media business is kind of an interesting business, and it's not how most businesses are monetized. Like most businesses, you make money by creating a product for a customer who has a problem, and they pay you for solving that problem. Media business is actually, you can make money in that way. Like some media businesses will have subscriptions that consumers pay for, but a lot of media businesses make money through advertising, where brands pay to get in front of a quality audience. And so I would say there's kind of two things that I thought through as we were starting to make money for Morning Brew. The first thing that I thought about is who are the brands, the companies that would absolutely kill to get in front of the upwardly mobile business leader, whether it's the college student or the young professional. And two, what is the story that I'm going to tell them such that by the end of our conversation, they feel like they're an idiot if they're not saying, how can I give you my money? And so I'll just walk through how I approach this, and we'll do an exercise to think about how would you find your first few customers for the solution that you came up with to solve the problem that you're most passionate about. So with Morning Brew, I did this exercise of, I called it warm to cold. Who is your warmest possible lead for your paying customer? And in my mind, I basically had two brands or companies in mind who I was like, they need to get in front of Morning Brew's business, college student, and young professional audience. The first is companies that already spend money advertising in other newsletters. The reason that was a warm audience for me is I don't have to go and convince an advertiser who's already spending in other email newsletters the value of spending in email newsletters because they know it because they're already doing it. The second group was, what are companies that are like number 3 or number 4 in kind of like the standings of their industry? Meaning, let's say I'm thinking about credit cards. And like, let's say number 1 in credit cards is like Amex. Number 2 is Visa. I was like, I don't want to go after Amex or Visa. They don't need my help marketing to the next generation. But what about like Discover Card? What about like Capital One? My guess is like they want to do everything humanly possible to get in front of the next generation so they can possibly work their way up from the 3rd and 4th spot to the 1st and 2nd spot. And so I targeted my outreach to those kind of profiles of customers in the early days. And then I worked on my story. And the way that I think about the story of your product is people don't care about features. They don't care about like the cool tricks your product does. All they care about is how it solves their problem in the best way humanly possible in a way that value significantly exceeds the cost that they have to pay you. And so in the context of these advertisers, the story I told was simple. Look, I know that you are struggling to get in front of the next generation of business leaders. I know that you've spent advertising with CNBC and the Wall Street Journal and these legacy business publications that have been around for hundreds of years. I also know that their audience, on average, is 65 years old, has been working for 40 years, and is going to retire in the next 10 years. Which means I know that you have not been able to get in front of the 21 to 35-year-old who is about to make a boatload of money in their career, have massive purchasing decisions, and you want them to think of you when they make that big purchasing decision. The only way you can get in front of that audience is by working with us. And that would be the story we would tell.
And so when you're hearing this, what I fear sometimes is they hear from people on stage and it's like an identification issue where it's like, well, I couldn't do that. I don't think that way. I don't know that. I don't recognize that. Guess what? Neither did he. You didn't know any of this stuff. An example, I took a screenshot in an email last night. Alex got some simple tips and advice from a colleague of mine back at CFE when he was a student. It was like, hey, you should put that website in your email signature, which seems like a duh. But at that point, you're not thinking that way. You don't know how to run a business. This is all new.
And the funny thing, which I told you earlier when we were talking, is in a weird way, after having built the business for the last 8 years and had some level of success, I actually feel like I know less today about entrepreneurship and building businesses than I did when we were starting. And I would say 2 things to what you said. One is I was rejected so many times when I was pitching advertisers on Morning Brew, when I was pitching investors to invest in us. And actually, I've heard from other entrepreneurs that I'm close with, they like actually turn it into a game, like the rejection game of like actually trying to rack up as many rejection points as possible to kind of like in a weird way turn what is considered a negative thing into a positive thing. Because for every rejection you get, you're getting information from someone on what could potentially help you evolve your story such that the next conversation you have is not rejection. The second thing I'll say is it's why I found so much value in having a co-founder, because at the end of the day, when you're building a business, realistically, you are only exceptionally good at 1, maybe 2 things. Everything else, you can find someone better that you can delegate that thing to. And in the context of Morning Brew, like storytelling and selling was one of my superpowers. And so I spent a lot of time on it. But my co-founder, Austin, spent time on things that I absolutely suck at. And we knew how to work with each other's strengths. So yes, I am naturally strong at storytelling, but things like financial modeling, linear thinking and focus as it relates to the business, like setting the strategy for the business. I did none of that, and my co-founder had all of those superpowers that I leaned on him for.
And you met him because he emailed you, if my memory serves.
He was a reader
Tell
of the
that story.
newsletter.
Yeah, that's worth it.
Yeah. So my co-founder, Austin, who also was a Michigan student, he was in Ross, minored in engineering. He was 2 years younger than me, so I graduated 2015. He graduated 2017. And he was one of the original readers of my newsletter, Market Corner. As Market Corner was picking up speed, again, this was when it was still a hobby, I sent out an email to my readers saying, hey, I'm thinking about taking this a little bit more seriously. Who wants to help out with the newsletter? He emailed me. We met in the Winter Garden in Ross for like 2 or 3 hours. And I was just, the way I describe it is like, I could tell he had such a complimentary brain to mine. And I was like, at the time, I was like, this is still a hobby, but I just want to have this brain around me as much as humanly possible. Austin to this day is still like the most linear thinker, like the most deep and strategic, unemotional thinker I've ever met, even relative to people 3 times his age who have been in startups for the last 40 years. And so, yeah, he went from reader to co-founder, and we've been partners on this business for the last 9 years.
Love it. Okay, so your strength being selling and targeting.
Yep.
We're going to run them through an exercise with the problem they've had around that.
Yeah, so actually at the end of this, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of homework to actually push this business forward to the point where like you actually find out in the next week whether the problem that you came up with solving and the solution is actually a viable business. But there's basically 2 things I want you to go through right now. One is the warm to cold framework. So in the same way that I thought about who are the perfect warm leads that I can reach out to advertise in Morning Brew from the start, I want you to list out who are the warmest leads that you have some connection to that you can start selling whatever your solution is, whatever your product is to over the weekend.
Your first customers.
Yeah, who are your first, if you have to list your first 3 customers, who are your first 3 customers you're going to? So the example I gave is like my doggy dry bar. I'm going to my family members who have dogs. I'm going to the people who live in my building in Hoboken that I know and have built relationships with who have dogs. And then I'm going into the neighboring buildings. So write down your first 3 customers.
In addition to that, the story.
Yep. And then the second piece is write down the story you would tell. So in the same way that I told this story to advertisers of, I understand what your problem is, I understand why you're experiencing that problem, and I'm going to tell you how I'm going to solve that problem in the best way humanly possible. Write down what the simple 1 to 2 sentence story is that you're telling those first 3 customers.
All right, we'll take 3 minutes on that one. Okay, so run us through that initial growth that you come to after having a point where you're now having defined advertisers, having them on board, having a defined story. Yep. Now it's time to really start to scale up and really look at this. How's that go?
Yeah, so basically, again, Morning Brew is a little interesting or weird because we effectively had 2 customers. Our reader is our customer that's not paying us, and then brands are our customer who is paying us. And we have to think about both of them as customers because if we don't think about our readers, we would never have the privilege of working with advertisers. But basically, what my co-founder and I thought about is, first of all, like, how do we get our first few thousand subscribers? And we're going to go through this exercise in a minute, but the way I've always thought about growth and growing your customer base and creating distribution is something that I call the hub and spoke model. And the hub and spoke model, very simply, is your spokes are all of your potential customers. Your hubs are either digital or in real life gathering places or communities that give you a ton of access to many spokes at once. So if I use the hub and spoke model for Michigan, the way we initially grew on Michigan's campus is we said, okay, what are hubs on Michigan's campus? And very simply it was business classes and business clubs. Because at the end of the day, if we could get into an Econ 101 lecture, we could have leveraged access to 500 students at once by getting to a single class. And so for the first, I would say, 3 months of the business, we would have the same process where I'd go to a business class. Right before it starts, I'd go up to the professor and say, hey, I'm a student in the business school, started this free newsletter. It's like the Wall Street Journal, but it doesn't suck. What we create is totally free. It'll make your students better students in your class, and if they don't like it, then they can always unsubscribe. They would usually say yes. I'd go up, I'd give my spiel for 60 seconds. My co-founder, Austin, would hand around a piece of paper and we'd basically say at the end, if you want to sign up, write down your email address and we will sign you up for the newsletter. Fun fact, the reason we had people write down their email addresses versus do it on their computer is it decreased friction. So the conversion rate of people writing down their email address was significantly higher relative to in the beginning when we said, hey, take out your laptop, go to morningbrew.com, punch in your email address, hit enter. On average, 20% of a class would do that. When we did the pass around a sheet of paper thing, it was 90% of a class. And that's why we did it in a more manual way where we did the work on the back end. So anyway, our initial hub were business classes and business clubs. We basically cleared out all business classes and clubs on Michigan's campus in 3 months. Let's just say that got us our first few thousand subscribers. Then our next question was, okay, what are our next hubs, right? Because like you clear out a hub and then you're like, what are our next hubs to scale distribution? And we said to ourselves, well, we need to find the Austin and Alex at other universities. We ended up creating a college ambassador program. That college ambassador program scaled to 200 schools and 300 ambassadors at some point, where basically we were providing training to students to go pitch Morning Brew in classes and clubs on their campus, and we were getting tens of thousands of subscribers at once. And then the final piece was we had really like infiltrated universities, and we were like, okay, but Morning Brew isn't just for college students. Like anyone who's interested in business, who wants something that is quick, digestible, and it reads like you're talking to a human, they're gonna enjoy this. That's when we added a referral program. So our referral program was basically like our ambassador program at scale, where you would subscribe to Morning Brew, you get a referral link. If you shared that referral link with anyone in your network and got people to subscribe, you would earn rewards like mugs, t-shirts, an exclusive Facebook group, getting flown to New York City to come to the Brew office. And so this idea of finding hubs that get you access to spokes and stacking them on top of each other, to me, is how you build distribution in any business.
In some ways, you're building community. You're building connectivity, you're building camaraderie between your customers in a way that when they walk around wearing Morning Brew swag in New York City, someone else sees it, it's like, oh, hey, you like the same things I do. Interesting, cool.
Exactly. And I just think in general, when you have a startup, one of the benefits of a startup is people who are early customers, they take pride in being early customers. So a lot of our ambassadors just had this feeling of pride of helping grow this like very grassroots style business. But yeah, at the end of the day, you know, whether it's classes on campus or let's just say like you're building a software business, one of the best hubs to get in front of a ton of tech consumers is something like Product Hunt. If you can get on Product Hunt and you can be one of the top 3 most upvoted products in a given day, you get distribution to like 1 million+ people who love being consumers of software products. And so whether it's in real life or digital, hubs are everywhere, but that's how you prioritize marketing and building up your customer base.
Absolutely. So students, again, to demystify some things here, it's not that Alex was always an amazing entrepreneur and he just had this prodigy-like ability from the onset. You learned as you went. This is 4 months after he's getting a tip of, hey, you should include the URL in your email signature. This is another email where it's like, hey, I'm out, I graduated, I'm in New York City, I'm still trying to make it go while I'm working a full-time job at a big company, doing this on the side. So this is all to say, you are in the same position to do this. You're no different in that way.
What you're also not seeing here is the email I probably sent 2 weeks earlier to Mark Cuban saying, hey, would you invest in our business? And he responded saying, I literally do not understand what you're doing. No, I won't invest. I both feel incredibly grateful. Like, by the way, just such a good example of really good community building and brand building. Mark Cuban probably gets thousands of emails a day. I've heard from numerous entrepreneurs that he responds individually to every single entrepreneur. Like his email is known publicly on the internet and he still responds to emails. But the other thing is like going back to rejection, it's like the downside of me reaching out to Mark Cuban and him rejecting me, the downside was 0, other than like the ego hit of him rejecting me. But the upside is because I sent that email initially, 3 years later when Morning Brew was way bigger, he was down to come onto our podcast because he had remembered me emailing him.
Love it. Okay. So to take this back to the problems that you're working on now, pull up your sheets again, and we're going to go ahead and have you go through a hub and spoke.
Yep. So now basically what I want you to do is write down as many hubs that give you access to customers for the products you came up with to solve the problem that you started with. And then what I want you to do is to circle the 1 or 2 hubs that you think would be the best place for you to start to get in front of customers.
Okay, here's the deal. We want to help you the same way that CFE helped Morning Brew and ZLI helped Morning Brew back when they were students by way of a thing called the Startup Competition, which was actually run in this course, and that Morning Brew won in 2017. We want to help you. So everything that you're writing down now, whether it's that idea, whether it's another idea, a product service that you have, we have a program called Fuel we would love to have you apply to. And we would love to have you pitch us for the notion of what you need funding for. So by all means, follow up. Let us know if we can be helpful with that. And I think Alex wants to frame a little bit of homework.
Yeah,
for you.
so
I will say it's optional homework, but
optional
I would highly
homework,
suggest it.
optional homework. But if you turn in the homework, aka just emailing me your answers, then we'll get a conversation going about your business. So the incentive is we can just start talking about whatever business you're working on. So I think what we haven't answered in kind of this exercise and this talk is like, what I like to say is there a there? Meaning, is there like an actual validated business? And I think there's 2 questions you have to ask yourself to say like whether what you've written down can actually be a validated business. 1, is it a good market to build in? And 2, do people give a shit enough to actually pay you for what you're doing? So the first one, is the market a good market? So my friend Noah Kagan, who actually just came out with a great book on entrepreneurship that you guys should check out. It's called $1 Million Weekend. He has this great analogy for why market is so important in building a business. I would actually argue it's the most important thing. It's actually more important than the product or the team. And this is Mark Andreessen's point of view as well. Basically what Noah says is like, you could be a world-class surfer. You could have a world-class surfboard. But if the wave that you're surfing on sucks, it's going to be really hard to be good at surfing. And so something to think about is, what is the wave that you're surfing on? And so just homework for you is to basically do 2 things. 1, understand how big your market is. So there are a lot of ways you can kind of try to triangulate the size of your market. One tool I would give you, and you can look it up on Google, is actually anyone in this room can sign up for a Facebook ad manager account. And it sounds like technical, it isn't. You sign up for a Facebook ad manager account, just means you have the ability to run ads on Facebook. But what you can do when you go into ad manager is you can create audiences that you would hypothetically want to run your advertisements in front of. Now, you're not going to run advertisements, but what you can do is as you build your audience, it will tell you, Facebook will tell you how large is the audience that's interested in this. So I did this last night with my beard trimming idea, and I wrote people who have interest in beard, or people who have interest in beard maintenance. And the size of the market was roughly, people have beards, it's like, in the US, it's 200 million people, so it's a pretty large audience of people who have beards. And then in terms of people who do beard maintenance, it was like 10 to 15 million. People who have actually stated that as an interest. So that's one way to size your market. But so one piece of homework is to go and actually size your market. The other exercise is to understand, is your market growing, is it shrinking, or is it stagnant? The best way to do this is Google has Google Search, and there's something called Google Search Trends, which anyone can use. And you can basically type in a search term, and Google will show you over a period of time, is there more or less searches happening for your search term? So for example, for dog grooming, I looked it up, and it has been growing consistently over the last 5 years. That will give you a sense of whether your market's growing. And then the final thing is actually selling a customer. So I want you to actually try selling your idea to 1 or 2 customers that you listed on your piece of paper, sell them the product before it exists, and see if you can get a yes from them. So that's your homework.
Absolutely, that's your homework. So here's the deal. You're going to turn in that paper as you walk out. I'd recommend taking a picture of it if I were you to continue working on and email Alex.
Yep, and then just shoot me an email if you've done it, and we'll talk about your business. My email is alex@morningbrew.com.
I'll send it out. Thanks, everybody.
What's up? Nice to meet you.
I'm Kale.
Great to meet you.